someone who's on the bus right now, probably has a fantastic idea that I will never speak to them ever, right?
Yeah.
But if we can start, getting them to be able to turn their ideas into a real life, product, I think that that's another great way for us to build up our ecosystem.
You're listening to Going Deep with Aaron Watson.
Get down.
You're going deep.
Jim, thank you for doing this. I'm really excited to be talking with you now.
Yeah, absolutely. Glad to be here.
So, Pittsburgh is one of the ground zeros for self-driving car technology. We've got all these different companies coming in testing vehicles, and that's kind of straightforward. People say, okay, drivers go away and robots show up to do that job. But what's interesting is that kind of paradigm shift opens up a lot of other questions that need to be answered, opportunities that someone needs to, or someone can take advantage of. Your company, MeterFeeder, fits within that paradigm here in Pittsburgh. So can you start off by just talking a little bit about the problem that MeterFeeder is looking to address and how that ties into self-driving cars?
Sure. So cities are starting to lose money just based off of the vehicle sharing platforms in the economy right now. I know that there are certain stories out floating around right now that just having a small scooter startup, putting them on a permit, the city lost somewhere around $500,000 over a 3-month period.
Wow.
So we were able to, really take a look at that, take a look at our data, and realize that we can not only price the curb and give them a good idea of what they should be charging for it, but at the same time we can actually help these vehicles pay for parking in real time.
And that's the type of thing where there's so many, it's in some ways hard to fathom now, but if you had your self-driving vehicle and it drives you straight to the front door of the movie or wherever it is that you're going, but then it needs to go somewhere else to park, there isn't necessarily someone there to feed the meter or know exactly which zone am I in. All those
Exactly.
subtle things regardless of where things stand.
Mm-hmm.
That's the problem that you're really fixing.
Yeah, absolutely. And another important thing is, I know a lot of people are like, oh, well, the cars will just drive around in perpetuity. But a lot of these vehicles, two things. One, are kind of expensive, so just pretend that it costs about $100,000. And their engines generally last for number's sake, let's say 100,000 miles.
Yeah.
So every mile that they drive, they're spending $1 on wear and tear on the vehicle. And if you're doing if you have an electric car, it really doesn't make sense to just drive the vehicle around needlessly, right? So, being able to understand how much it costs to keep on driving versus how much it costs to just stop the car, right? It should be able to understand that. The vehicle should be able to understand that and also pay for parking itself.
And how much has this vision for the company evolved and changed? You've been doing a little over 2 years now. Got into Y Combinator early 2016. How have you kind of tweaked or changed this vision versus just tried to execute it?
Sure. So when we first started off, I tell the story, I have a wife and 5 kids, so there's no chance of me ever having change in my pockets. So the idea is every time I would come up to a coin meter, I knew I was going to get a parking ticket. So me and my co-founder, we've been writing software together for the past 18 years. So we realized that there was an issue. We built out a MVP, entered it into a hackathon, and 300 people entered. We won, and we got $10K in our pockets, and we rolled out Dormont, right? So we awkwardly found a niche there because it's not like they have tons of cash. They don't have City of Pittsburgh cash, right? And for people who are not in the Pittsburgh area, Dormont is one of the suburbs of Pittsburgh, right? So they have a need to be able to accept modern day technology and ways of accepting payment, but at the same time, they don't have the money in order to, spend $10,000, $15,000 for parking enforcement device and, put up the kiosks that cost an exorbitant amount of money, right? So how do we do that? How can we actually enable them to accept digital payments for parking, but without upgrading any sort of infrastructure, right? So when we were able to build an enforcement kit, low cost, it's a tablet. It's an Android tablet. So what does an Android tablet cost, right? So since we were able to do that, now they're able to take a look and see, hey, is there a quarter in the meter? No. All right, let's look on our enforcement app. Did someone pay digitally? Yes, they did. They continue on. If you didn't pay digitally, you just, from the enforcement app, just write a ticket right from there, right? So thinking it from it in that perspective, right? Let's deal with the small to mid-sized municipalities.
Yeah.
Let these big companies fight it out over Pittsburgh. Eventually, if we close every single municipality around Pittsburgh, eventually someone in Pittsburgh is going to say, wait a second, why does all surrounding municipalities have better technology than actually in the city itself, right? If you go to Homestead, if you get a parking ticket, you pay the parking ticket immediately. Can't do that in Pittsburgh, right? They also have this pay-by-vehicle technology, right, where you can turn your car off if you're on the platform. You can turn your car off and automatically pay for parking. So, yeah, we're really excited about where we've been, but we're super excited that we're not only listening to the future city, we're listening to the effects of that future city on the suburbs as well.
And developing any sort of product or service takes time, and just refining what the offering is and getting the features up and just the infrastructure of that even product to be in place. Mm-hmm. So I'd also imagine, just in terms of like the scale, if we're talking about a smaller municipality outside of a major city, that is also the chance that you and your team have to get the product into the right place to eventually support those larger clients.
Absolutely.
So just as they need the psychological trail of, okay, these other people are using it, there's this validation, there's this coherence in the market, you also need that time to really be able to bring that entire offering up to the level that they might have, that expectation might not necessarily be there for the municipality.
Exactly. And in addition, it's kind of funny to bring this up to, parking authorities and folks who are used to doing things in a specific way. A lot of folks, I don't want to say that they're like afraid of technology, but if they don't understand it, like if it's not in a language that they can fully comprehend, it's really hard to sell that, right? So by us going into those smaller municipalities, not only does it give us the ability to build something that people actually want, it gives us the ability to actually display to the bigger city. We can just say, hey, drive 3 miles, west, and you'll be able to park in a MeterFeeder zone.
Exactly. So talk a little bit about the decision to situate your offices back here in Pittsburgh and come back from San Francisco. Because
Sure.
I know that was slightly contentious even amongst some of the investors who are a part of MeterFeeder.
Yeah, we actually, the CEO of Combinator actually grabbed me by my arm, me and my co-founder, and we spoke for about a good 45 minutes. I thank him daily, even if it's not verbal, for having that conversation, because I learned a ton, but at the same time, he was sort of saying, investors kind of invest in patterns, right? He point blank asked me, what was the last $1 billion company to come out of Pittsburgh? And who had $1 billion exit? Like the only ones that I can think of, I'm an old guy, right? So I'm just like, 4 Systems, Free Markets.
It's been a while.
And everyone just looks at me funny, like, who are they?
Yeah.
Right? So, I'm glad that there's companies like Duolingo and folks like that who are actually starting to get larger valuations. But to be honest, there's nothing really from a pattern perspective of how someone could build in 2000, like in the 2010s, 2020s, how to build $1 billion business.
Is that explicitly your goal, or is that explicitly the goal of your investors?
That's the goal of the people who would be looking to invest in a company like ours.
Okay. Is that something that you would say, like, you came in eyes wide open knowing that's the expectations and maybe the kind of strings attached to that type of money, or is that something that you came to realize through having a conversation like that one?
I mean, it's never had to be verbalized, right? We just kind of figured that if someone, if all of a sudden I'm showing up like, here's my safe and I have a $10 million cap, you eventually want me to have a $1 billion buyout so that you can be like, hey, I invested in that unicorn. Look at how smart I am, right? So, I mean, not only is it the money aspect, but it's also the bragging rights as well.
Right. So you talked about your partner both being developers and working together to code this.
Mm-hmm.
How do you balance the responsibilities of building the product with the responsibilities of selling it? How do you manage that, and how have you gone about it?
So when me and my co-founder first started working together, we would get projects, we would work on, medical software, retail, things like that. But it was very important that we knew how to communicate with one another. So that communication enabled us to, get a project and finish the project super quick because we knew what each other were doing, right? So since I had to take the CEO role, it kind of meant that I had to also take the sales role as well. So if I would go out and sell something, sometimes my mouth might be a little bit too big and I would say, oh yeah, sure, of course we can do that. In which case I would come back to my co-founder and say, all right, CTO, this is what we need to do. And he was like, well, let me hurry up and give this to my number one developer. There you go, Jim. Right? And then I would go and I would help write the software, and a week later we'd go back to the customer and say, does this work for you? And they would say yes, and they'd be none the wiser. We would refer to it as the development team.
Right.
So
you just come in a little more sleep deprived.
Exactly.
Yeah. So just even in terms though of developing that skill set, so like clearly you can articulate the product and you actually have a real idea of what it might take to add the features that someone requested, but and this might be more of a trope than like an actual reality, but the person who just wants to stay in front of the computer and do that type of work and then either does the biz dev sales begrudgingly, like out of necessity, versus really having an appetite for it and
Right.
and holding it in equal gravity to the product management work.
Right. It's kind of funny because I think that my mindset comes a little bit further outside of that.
Okay.
Right? I speak about my wife and children very regularly, right? And I think about them very regularly. So when it's one of those situations where I have to say, what do I need to do to feed them, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to ask me twice to go and, if you need me to break dance in the street, you can call me the B-boy. I will be out there beach streeting it up and making sure that, I'm coming home and they're well taken care of, right? And I'll do it with a smile on my face. So, do I want to do fundraising? I mean, I feel like it's high-class begging, to be honest, right? Sometimes it's just terrible. It feels bad to have just a group of people go out of their way to tell you how terrible you and your company is, right? But I will do it, and I will keep doing it to make sure that my people are taken care of, not just my family, but my employees' family, my employees and my employees' families as well.
Necessity is the mother of invention.
Absolutely.
That's fascinating. What's interesting to me is we do a lot of interviews with folks in the tech scene, and the narratives around fundraising, it's just a very fascinating time in general. Can we get more capital into the city? Will that lead to these companies of these different sizes? And then simultaneously, we do this kind of like high-low thing of doing interviews with the tech entrepreneurs, and then we're interviewing like someone who started the new nail salon in Lawrenceville, and just the kind of different paradigm they're even just seeing business through and how the structure of that is. When you, do you see a pathway for other tech companies to come out of the city of Pittsburgh and go more of a bootstrap route, more of a route of, sometimes it's out of necessity, or do you think that conversation around funding and the attraction of investors to a city like Pittsburgh is essential for it to take that next step?
That is a deep and difficult question,
Yeah.
right? Because can we get more money in Pittsburgh? Absolutely, right? Pittsburgh is doing a fantastic job marketing themselves as being this fresh new tech hub. To be honest, like one of the greatest things about Pittsburgh is that you can keep your burn obnoxiously low and still survive, right? I mean, I brought in like a decent amount of cash, and they all thought that I was going to run out of burn, like substantially sooner. They thought that, okay, we'll find out in 3 months if he really still has any money left. And, I'd show him the books, and surely enough, I spent what I said that I was going to spend.
Mm-hmm.
It's, for someone to have an 800 square foot office for $650 a month in Silicon Valley, yeah, good luck. What kind of, you're standing outside for that,
Yeah.
right? In New York City, same thing, right? But here I have a newly renovated office, right? It is not a bad commute to work, and I can live on virtually nothing, just because of where I am. So to start a business, it's great, right? The lack of capital, it forces the Pittsburgh entrepreneur to think a little bit differently. Where in, California and New York, you have a little bit more money, you can do a little bit more daring things with that capital, right? Here, it's just like, we need to survive, we need to be smart, we need to come together as a community, build each other up, and, eventually someone's going to rocket ship and end up creating that pattern that I was telling you about it before, as far as venture capitalists. Like, someone's going to eventually, make that $1 billion business, and then we'll have the prototype, and then we'll be able to do it and replicate it, like we're trying to do right now.
Totally. And the other interesting aspect of it is that there's the feeling of a certain type of inevitability versus like, well, I sure hope it happens, let's shake the snow globe. And with something like that, like, I attribute most of that to what I perceive to be the density of talent. So certainly we don't have the numbers of some of those other larger metropolises, but CMU, tech talent, like the amount of investment that's even going into supporting this type of ecosystem, to me that's where I get that similar sense of inevitability versus maybe what I hear from other ecosystems. Would you say it's a similar place where that comes from for you?
Yeah. I mean, I do think that there's another aspect that we kind of need to think about a little bit more. I think it would be great, and if I mess around and say this too many times, I might end up doing it myself. I hope I don't end up doing it myself, but I will if I need to. Is to get more people writing software. More people need to write software so that they can either A, get a well-paying job,
Yeah.
or B, like start their own companies, start their own businesses, right? The reason why I kind of want to go like even lower beyond the CMU side of things, not that they don't need help, right? I'm a CMU guy, I need help, right? I'm not saying that. I am saying that, if we do something a little bit more inclusive, someone who's on the bus right now, probably has a fantastic idea that I will never speak to them ever, right?
Yeah.
But if we can start, getting them to be able to turn their ideas into a real life, product, I think that that's another great way for us to like build up our ecosystem.
So the solutions that I know of, and not all of these are Pittsburgh based, but Tech Elevator is coming to Pittsburgh. They're already in Ohio. There's the Academy up on the hill. There's Lambda School. I don't know if you've heard of Lambda School in San Francisco.
I've heard of them, don't know that much.
So they are the quintessential example of their incentives are perfectly in line with the students. They don't take $1 until you've been placed in a position that pays more than $50,000 a year, and they're completely responsible for your training in that skill set. So if you can pass their like basic proficiency tests, they're going to run with you, and if you have to redo that module 3 times, cool.
Excellent.
And that's the type of thing that, there's countless stories of the person who, I was working a minimum wage job, I was doing whatever, and then transition, and like doubling, tripling their income. Now maybe they'd move to San Francisco to do that,
Yeah.
but even that accessibility, I'm totally with you in terms of it not necessarily being exclusively the CMU talent.
Right. And even to think about that, right? If the people are the ones who are living in the Hill District or in Braddock or, another, socioeconomically difficult location, I guess is the best way to put it. Yeah, I think that they can start having a very high quality of life, just because it is so cheap to live out there, right? You don't have to live in Pittsburgh proper. You don't have to, move to San Francisco.
Right.
You can still live substantially, very well in your means, and have a fantastic life.
So what about this conversation? And so this stuff always to me comes back to the stories that we're telling one another.
Mhm.
And I think, I can think of people who are of reasonable intelligence. If I were to proposition them and say, you should go to this school and learn how to code, there has to be some sort of desire. But even before they can get to desire or imagining it, they self-select themselves out because the skill set of the computer programmer is kind of put on this mantle from a story standpoint. It's like, oh, that's only for the super genius, the whatever. It's inaccessible to someone like me, not because of economics, but because of my perception of my capacity.
Absolutely.
As someone who's doing it, how would you go about dispelling that notion for someone who's telling themselves that story or has been told that story by society?
Right. So one of the first things that I tell people when I start teaching them how to write software is pretty much I'm a professional Googler, right? It's like you write for about 5 minutes, you get stuck on something, you Google it, you find out the answer and what you're doing wrong, you go back, you fix it, you write for another 5 minutes. That's literally what software development is, right? And, there are more complex, there's deeper places that you can go. But I mean, in essence, all it is you learn how to build an object, you learn how to build another object, and then you deal with the interactions between the two. That's it. So all you have to do is with that in mind, you can start building some really amazing things, with just that basic concept.
Okay, that's the most interesting part to me is I know those exist, but even conversations around should you go to school,
Mm-hmm.
should you go to college, all these are, so much of it is in the embedded culture and the stories of, well, this is what success is, or this is how it works out.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think it's so fascinating that those opportunities are out there and people, it's pretty accessible for people to take advantage of them. They just need to even know about it.
Right. And I guess that's the difficult thing. I think that in the future, this is just where my brain sort of goes. People are probably going to skip college.
Mm-hmm.
You go to college if there's something that you want to do that's expensive, right? Oh, I want to get into high energy physics. So since I'm not going to install a relativistic heavy ion collider in my backyard, I might as well, go to some place that already has this, right? If it's writing software, starting a business, just build it, try it.
We could all be professional Googlers. It's not just code writing, right?
Exactly.
It's how do I write a business plan? How do I do my book? It's all
Absolutely.
Googleable.
Absolutely.
And that whole advantage or kind of centralization of that information's gone away.
Yeah, absolutely.
I dig it. So as we aim towards wrapping up, it's already been 20 minutes. This has absolutely flown by, blowing my mind. Talk a little bit about bringing team together. You're in Braddock, the conversations that you're having around both tech and non-tech talent for MeterFeeder, what does that look like? And are you having, is that a pain point for you? Is that not necessarily been something that has been a big issue for you?
It hasn't really been that big of an issue for me, just because, I meet people and I talk to them. My wife has tried very hard to get me to learn to speak English.
Okay.
So now that I'm starting to get the hang of it a little bit, I just talk to people, right? And then eventually, if I need someone, I find the person that I need, and then they become friends, and then they actually come on board, right? One of the first hires that we had, the finance guy, I worked with him 20 years ago, right? he ended up becoming the CEO of Plantscape. And he was like, I'm done with those guys, and all of a sudden comes on and hops on board with us, right? So, yeah, like even the first support guy that we got, he was my co-founder's old roommate, and he's an actor. So he just acted like he knew what he was talking about on the phone, and he made everyone feel so wonderful, you know? So, yeah, being able to pull in talent is just really just basic networking and making sure that people understand what your needs are.
To hang on to that point for a moment, how do you put that out into the world? Are you like really into writing the meticulous job description? Are you like, here's the 10 people that I'm going to text and be like, you know, spread the word? Like, what is your way of pushing that outwards?
I think it's more of being honest with people, and it's like, man, I'm really having a problem with this, right? And then all of a sudden, some really super connected person is just like, you know, you should really talk to that person, right? And it's never like a overnight sort of situation. It's one of those things where, okay, let's meet. Who do you know? You know, are you going to try to come in and steal all of our shares or something like that, right? This is my baby. Do not mess it up. So, yeah, it's one of those things where I'm glad that I have the people around me who it's sort of a safe space where I can tell them this is what I'm having an issue with.
Yeah.
And it's, oh, well, it sounds like you would need, boom. Okay, next step. Here's this person who's, you know, doing, you know, selling equipment to New Jersey Transit, and you know, to New Jersey Transit. Okay,
We'd like to talk to them.
We would love to speak to the New Jersey Transit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's fascinating because we explore connection and meeting and connecting people a lot on this show.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea that it's not exclusively for, you know, the person who just revels in that. Like, there's people who just absolutely love to do it, but there's people who understand the necessity of it, and that,
Mm-hmm.
you know, fits into the broader picture of what it is that they're doing. And the way that you explain, like, that sounds so accessible for just about anyone.
Yeah, I mean, what I see entrepreneurs do entirely too much, and I'm definitely guilty of this, and I've actually stopped or calmed down on it, is just to have this aura of everything is just fine. And once I put that, like, stopped doing that and started telling people what was wrong, like, that's when people actually started helping me. So.
Yeah. Beautiful. Last thing, and then we'll ask our last two questions. We connected at Innovation Works Diversity Inclusion Brunch.
Right.
And you said something very poignant there about how seeing the room full, it's such a diverse room full of people who are invested in the tech scene and active there, was a big part of why you came back to Pittsburgh, a big part of something that you've been pursuing here, in addition to obviously getting MeterFeeder off the ground. Can you speak a little bit to the change that you've seen? Have you seen an improvement, and if so, what has that looked like, and what work, if obviously there's always more work to be done, but just speak a little bit to that.
Sure. So I guess the first one is going to be a little bit of a nicer one, right? Because when I would go to a diversity event,
Yeah.
it'd be like me. You know, yeah, I get it. I've been writing software for, good grief, like 35 years now.
Date yourself.
So the idea of, you know, people coming out and trying to find people who look like me, software developers who look like me, it really wasn't there at the beginning, you know. So yeah, it was ready to bring a tear to my eye, because there was just like so much support for people who look like me. So next time, hopefully the next time that they see, you know, 6'4" big brown guy walking in the door with dreadlocks down his back, they're like, maybe this guy can code, right? So yeah, because I know that I've had tons of issues like that because they just assume that I can't, right?
Back to the stories that we tell one another. Like that's part of it. Like, you just have to reframe what is even, you know, the narrative that you're assuming. That's the whole game.
Yeah. So as far as, you know, if we're talking about the entrepreneurial side of things, how can we do it? write checks, like that's virtually it, right? I mean, Kalani Cook doing Black Tech Nation, yeah, she could do so much if she was funded, right? Yeah, and that's the thing. There's so much more to be done, right? It's like we need to start teaching more people and bringing more people in that, you know, and being intentional about it, that, you know, we can all eventually start working with one another.
Yeah, and the checks, it's investment, but it's also
Right.
like clients and customers and spending your dollars.
Absolutely.
That's a big thing Adam Polisic has talked a lot about. It's like you walking into a business and spending your money there is
Right.
more than just support. It's more than just about, it is viability for a lot of these
Right,
businesses.
right, absolutely.
Beautiful. Jim, this has been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed speaking with you. I
Absolutely.
want to make sure that people can check out MeterFeeder in the digital world. What coordinates can we provide them to do so?
Sure. So we are at www.meterfeeder.com, at MeterFeeder, and if you're looking for me personally, you can usually find me on Twitter. I'm at Hizo. That's a long story all in itself. But yeah, also on LinkedIn, I'm always around. Just shoot me a message and let me know that you're not trying to sell me something, and I'll add you as a connection.
Beautiful. We're going to link that in the show notes so you can find it. goingdeepwithaaron.com/podcast is the place to find it for this and every episode of the show. But as we do at the end of each conversation, Jim, I want to give you the mic a final time to issue an actionable personal challenge for the audience.
Okay. Actionable personal. Okay. So the thing that I would probably push for is just speaking to people, right? The more people that we speak to that don't look like ourselves, the more we normalize what the news is trying to demonize, I guess is the best way to put it, right? So whatever echo chamber that you subscribe to, there's people on the other side who don't understand who you are, right? So the only way that we're going to get around it is to like actually speak to people and like speak to them, not yell at them, right? And you know, hopefully once in a while we'll actually agree on something.
Yeah, and you have to make a concerted effort to do something like that.
Absolutely.
It's not just going to happen upon you if you're in the same pattern, going to the same places, spending your time in the exact same way.
Right.
There's no chance of that changing. And I mean, something that I think about, like as promoting a long form podcast, I have a definitive appetite for, hopefully, not that I'm not in my own echo chamber to some degree or another, but being very conscious at the very least of the media diet that I have.
Right.
And one of the things that can propel you into occupying those different spaces and seeing those different people is maybe changing up your media diet as well.
Absolutely. And then, but you have to make sure that you don't end up with a tinfoil hat on.
True. This has been great. Jim, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
We just went deep with Jim Gibbs. Hope everyone out there has a fantastic day. Hey, thank you so much for watching all the way to the end of my interview with Jim Gibbs. I'm really excited about what he's doing with MeterFeeder. I'm so glad that he's in Pittsburgh, and I'm really curious on your perspective of tech firms moving to cities like Pittsburgh, moving away from cities like LA, San Francisco, New York. Let me know in the comments below if you think we're going to see more of this, or if you think more companies are going to set up shop in those major cities.